Grüezi miteinander, ganz herzlich willkommen und einen wunderschönen guten Tag, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde aus nah und fern. Ich begrüße Sie zu einer weiteren Sondersendung aus Georgien. Hochinteressant, was ich hier erlebe als Schweizer in diesem Kleinstaat. Kleinstaaten haben ja ein ganz spezielles Lebens- und Politikgefühl und ich versuche hier im Turbogang gewissermaßen zu ergründen, wie die Situation in Georgien ist. Georgien, ein Land, das ja noch nicht so lange wieder unabhängig ist, nicht wie die Schweiz, dann gelegen in einer geopolitischen Schlangengrube, könnte man sagen, sehr, sehr anspruchsvoll und entsprechend muss man sich immer auch den Zusammenhang der politischen Vorgänge vorstellen. Georgien auch eine Projektionsfläche und auch ein Spielball der aktuellen geopolitischen Konflikte, Russland, Amerika, Ukraine und so weiter, das ist Ihnen alles bestens bekannt. Und heute haben wir einen ganz spannenden Mann. Wir haben immer sehr spannende Leute hier im Programm, aber heute einen ganz besonders spannenden Mann vor der Kamera. Und zwar ist es einer der erfahrensten Diplomaten Georgiens. Er ist gewissermaßen der Doyen der georgischen Diplomatie. Er hat mir gerade erklärt, sein Name sei möglicherweise italienischen Ursprungs, noch weit, weit in die Geschichte zurückreichend, als italienische Priester und Missionare hier zugange waren, und es kam dann unvermeidlicherweise natürlich auch zu amorösen Verwicklungen, das ist ja klar, und aus diesen ist dann hervorgegangen unter anderem eben eine interessante auch Gruppe von Georgiern mit italienischen Wurzeln. Ich begrüße ganz, ganz herzlich in dieser Sendung den Herrn Konstantin Sghenti. Ich muss das richtig aussprechen, Sghenti. Ich bin nicht des Georgischen mächtig. Herr Sghenti war lange Diplomat in Diensten des georgischen Staates, seit der Unabhängigkeit, noch unter der Regierung Gamsa-Churdia. Das ist gewissermaßen ganz am Anfang nach dem Zusammenbruch der Sowjetunion gewesen. Er kennt alle natürlich den Eduard Shevardnadze, er kennt den Michail Saakashvili, auch die jüngsten Mitglieder der Regierung. Bis ins letzte Jahr, 33 Jahre lang, war er tätig im diplomatischen Dienst, zuletzt in Kuwait, davor unter anderem in Ungarn und in Österreich als diplomatischer Vertreter Georgiens. Er hat mir erzählt, seine ursprüngliche Ausbildung, er ist Orientalist, also er kennt sich sehr gut aus in der arabischen Welt. Er ist parteilos und auch hier noch eine Information. Er hat gesagt, das einzige Mal, dass er je einer Partei beigetreten sei, weil er das musste, um überhaupt studieren zu können, das war damals der Kommunistischen Partei in der Sowjetunion. Aber das sei schon lange vorbei und heute sei er unabhängig. Deshalb haben wir hier den unabhängigen Blick. Ich werde jetzt auf Englisch wechseln, damit wir uns verstehen. Well, I made my introduction, Mr. Sghenti. It's great to have you here in this program, the independent, experienced Doyen, the Grand Seigneur of Georgian diplomacy. Welcome to our Swiss and German and Austrian audience. It's great that you take your time. I had many conversations now with members of the government, of the establishment, you can say, of this Georgian Dream Party, and they tell me one thing. They say there is a sinister global war party trying to push Georgia into these geopolitical conflicts. To be honest, it sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory to me, but they have convincing arguments on their side. I would be curious, what is your view? Is there truth in this? Is there some kind of global war party trying to drag Georgia into these terrible conflicts we are still in the middle of right now?
Thank you for inviting me. First of all, I'm glad to answer your questions and your audience. Georgia always was some kind of confrontation of some global forces because of our geographical place, because we are just on the border between Asia and Europe, just on the border. And when the people are saying here that we are pure Europeans or we are Asians, we cannot be either pure Europeans or Asians because we are just on the border. During our history, we made quite a lot from the east and from the west. And I think the Georgians are Georgians, a little bit different from other people because of this. Because we are Christian people for long Christian history, and this is one of the main signs of our, to be the part of the West and Christian world. At the same time, we always quite often were under the pressure of the Eastern forces, Turks, Iranians, Mongols, etc., etc. But we defend our religion, and we are among those people. They are not so much in the world, such people like we are, because it's really, we defend our language, our Christianity, our traditions, our way of life, in spite of this pressure from the East and from the West. And that's why we are, a little bit different, what I'm saying. And now also, we are in the same place on the border. And when it is, the global conflict between, to say so, liberals and conservatives, all of it, I think this global conflict, which is, in the world now, especially after coming of the Trump's administration, we are also, the part of this conflict. And it's essential, I think so, because of our geographical position. And there is no question that the most of the population of Georgia, I think more than 80%, not because, some people really are thinking like this, that we want to be the part of the West, part of Europe. And to be the part of European, it's for sure. The people's support of this idea is quite clear. And when the opposition is saying that we are moving to the direction of Russia and so on, I think it's not true. Because we are occupied by Russia still. Still 20% of Georgia, of our territory, is occupied by Russia. This is a fact. And Russian tanks are 300 kilometers from Tbilisi, maybe less. If we'll count Akhalgori, I'm in the region in so-named South Ossetia, Tskhinvali region, it's less, 55 kilometers, no more. So they are standing there, these Russian forces. So we are quite in a very unique position. And when someone is demanding from us, crucial and the kind of policy against Russia, why you are not doing this and why you are, I think our government is acting quite wise, doing this what they are doing now. Because in such a situation, to confront Russia openly, I think it's stupid. We cannot reach anything with this. First of all, economically, socially, and then, of course, politically. So I think the policies in this direction is quite understandable of our government. It's for sure. As for inside country, of course, there are people who are thinking that the government can do this way or that way much more better or something like this. If everyone knows that I am not supporter, but follower of the policy of our government, but it does not mean that I like everything what our government is making. It's not like this. I have maybe a lot of questions, but I can tell you, for me, there is no alternative to this government. If I would see the opposition who is able to govern the country instead of this government, then I will think to vote for anyone else. But from my point of view, the main is that this government, at this situation, they have no alternative. Because coming back, Saakashvili's party and their followers, it's impossible because they left so many problems, and to say so diplomatically, in their future, that most of the people will not support them. It's no question about this. So I think this is the main.
No.
When we are speaking about the situation inside Georgia, there is no alternative of this government.
What is the explanation that the opposition parties do not even participate in the parliament? There are still some parties, they refuse to participate in the parliament. They say this is not a legitimate government. They have rigged the election. We cannot participate. What do you make of this? Are they bad losers, or is there a grain of truth? Is the government, also because of this huge pressure on Georgia, on this geopolitical confrontation, has it become a bit radicalized, too authoritarian? Has it given reason to the opposition not to participate in the parliament? Can you explain that?
You know, from my point of view, the government, beginning from the elections of 2012, when the situation changed in Georgia, they gave a lot of chances to our opposition, I mean this opposition, to act normally, to become normal opposition. Because when they are the people who are voting for you, they are voting for you for going to the parliament, working there politically, to criticize this government, maybe to make pressure, but from inside, from the parliament, to change some things inside the country. You can work as a policyman, as a politician, but they are not doing this. From the first days of, I think, this new situation in Georgia, you know, because the main reason is that they are mostly showing their perceptions. They're founded on their perceptions what's going on here, not the facts. I think so, because facts are facts, and you cannot do anything with the fact. Of course, some can have some perception of this fact this way or that way, but when you are the policyman or woman, you are politician, you can act like a politician, not in the streets, not out of the parliament, not shaking the country all the time, not trying all the time to make some revolutions, to change the government with the use of the force, with the use of the NGOs, with the use of the this and that, some recipes from outside. No, it's not the way. Because, you know, I remember I've been in a lot of meetings and conferences at the beginning of 90s, when they openly were saying, Georgia is failed state. I was sitting there and listening to this. It was pity for me, and I was sometimes maybe angry that someone is calling my country failed state, but this was the fact. At that time, we really were failed state. But after this government made a lot, first of all, economically, in social life, in changes what they made. You can see this very well here, with the infrastructure, with the roads, with the, I don't know, in education, in healthcare, in everything. And they made a lot of job. So the country is not failed state now. It's really the country, and the position of our government shows that they can defend their principles. How they're thinking that these are practically like this, not the perceptions. Perceptions are, you know, I think the Europeans, first of all, the European Union, and our government likes to say this, but it's true, European bureaucrats, they like to speak to us with the perceptions, you know, not with the facts. And when our government is saying, several times our prime minister, maybe you had a meeting with him and he told you this, we are ready to talk, but founded on the facts. Come please, let's sit and let's talk. What are the problems of Georgia in our relations with the European Union, with the European countries, European policy? Let's speak openly about this. We are not against this. We're support, but they are not going to do this. They are speaking about, please do this, please do that, please. And I understand those people, maybe not fully, but I understand partially those people who are saying, we have the orders from Moscow and from the center at that time, and now we are obliged to have the orders from Europe, from Brussels. We don't like to be like this. If we are really country and state, not failed state, and we feel ourselves like this, I feel myself like this, really.
What do you think then is behind these demonstrations? I saw yesterday it's a small demonstration, one has to say, they still can demonstrate. It's not that the police pushes them away. I saw a lot of young people. I talked to people from the opposition, from NGOs. They were saying, no, this government is too close to Putin. They're selling out Georgia to the Russians. It's not true what they are saying. I mean, this is just the perception of these young people. But the question is, we had huge demonstrations before Christmas in December, etc., November. What is behind this? What is the force? The government says they are all, mobilized by NGOs, which are paid by foreign agents, which is also, of course, very convenient to say for a government if there is a demonstration. How do you explain these demonstrations? What is behind it?
I think not all of them. We will see there the people, especially the young people, who really are thinking that the government, let's say so, is doing not enough to be part of Europe, to be the member of the European Union and so on. They really feel this. But they are not much. I think this is minority of these demonstrations. And the majority really are those, who feel themselves as losers, because they are trying to come to the government from 2012. From that time, for so long time.
That was the time, you have to explain, when the former president Saakashvili was outvoted of his office. Yes, from that time they are trying to come back, and when they cannot do this with the elections, they are trying some other, possibilities and methods to do this. And those forces in the West, most of the liberal forces, who are the supporters of, let's say so, this globalization and, deep state and war party, as our government is saying, I understand this, why they are calling them war party. Because this deep state is connected not only to the bureaucrats who were working in the United States or are working in the European Union countries, but also they are people who are making a lot of money on wars and conflicts. That is military-industrial complex. As President Eisenhower famously said in the 50s in the United States.
Yes. So they are trying there, to achieve their goals here. And especially in the countries which are on the border of Russia, The Russian policy is to make, beginning from the force, I think, to have the buffer zone as large as it's possible from the border of Russia, to have the sphere of influence there. And Ukraine is in such a territory, our South Caucasus is in this. So they want, this is, when the President Clinton called Georgia first the backyard of Russia, the people were quite angry, some of them, and me too. Because, at the time I was in the United States in 1993.
At Harvard University, we have to say, yes?
Yes. Why backyard of Russia? Why we are backyard? Because we are small but proud Georgians, and we don't want to be backyard. But while I became the strict follower of realpolitik, and I became of this, and I'm supporting, what is Mr. Kissinger is writing in his books, and so on and so on. It's the fathers of realpolitik, really, because I think the rules of the game in the international politics are writing superpowers. This is fact until now. By the way, I was at Harvard University when Huntington presented its Clash of Civilizations.
Right, it came out 1993, the book at the time, yes.
I was there at that time. And the people was at that time, I'm very sorry, but listening to the fairy tales of Fukuyama, not what Huntington was saying.
Fukuyama, just to explain, he was the writer, the author of the book, The End of History, the victory of the West, of the capitalist, liberal democracy.
Where is this victory? Show me, please. There is no victory. The most of the facts are showing now that what Huntington predicted with his Clash of Civilizations, it's going now on. And not Fukuyama's, what he was writing there. I was there, and by the way, it was a very interesting story if we have some time. I asked during the presentation, Huntington, where we are Georgians. He invented 7 civilizations, if you remember, in his book. And where we are Georgians. He told me, you are part of the Russian Orthodox. I said, why we are part of Russian Orthodox? We were Christians a little bit earlier than Russians with our culture, with our everything, And he was quite angry, with this question. And he said, look at the map. Where is Russia and where are you? You can see Georgia there? And the students begin to laugh, really. And then he invited me and Mr. Givis Aldastani, who was, Harvard-educated Georgian living there in Boston, at the Harvard Cafe and said, please, never mind that I, insulted Georgians or something like this. You are just small country and so on and so on. But, really, backyard. If we are backyard of Russia, there are some countries that are backyard of the United States. Mm. And I understand Mr. Trump when he wants his backyard to be under his,
So you're saying that these spheres of influence are a fact of real politics. Yes. And if there are people who are saying, well, this doesn't exist, or only the other ones have them, that's hypocrisy. All the huge powers have spheres of influence. Yes. And what does it mean for a country like Georgia if you are within the sphere of influence of Russia and want to stay independent? What is the most important trait you have to have in politics?
That means to walk on the edge of knife. Really. We are doing like this all our history. Not to fall on the right side, not to fall on the left side, but to follow our interests. And this is very difficult.
So on the tightrope and our lives out underneath.
Of course, really, because of our position. After the war in Ukraine, the ways, the economic and business ways to Europe from Asia, they changed their route, It's impossible through Kazakhstan, through Russia, to reach Europe, through Ukraine, So this southern corridor became quite important, not only for us, for Georgians, not only for Oriental countries, but for Europeans too, because they want these goods from Central Asia, even from China. Maybe someone are against this one road, one belt policy of China, but they need this Chinese good. How many billions are this between China and Europe? Count, please, in this economy and business. So if they can do this, why not Georgia? And if we are playing all our history, our role of corridor of the way of this southern corridor, why we will not do this now? It's a moment for doing this, and we are trying to use this.
What is the reason that Georgia managed to keep its independence? I'm from Switzerland. We are a small country in Europe, Western Europe, which was a very dangerous. Europe was a snake pit, like the Caucasus, in geopolitics many decades ago. And our Russia was Germany, was Prussia, was the German superpower, which was very close to our borders. And even these powers in Europe had the feeling that Switzerland, the French part, should participate in France, the German part should participate in Germany. We could manage our independence. Russia managed it too. Of course, you were part of the Soviet Union, but after that, what is the reason that you could keep and defend your sovereignty? You are so small, Russia is so big, they have their tanks here. What's the recipe? What's the mystery? What's the strategy of survival?
I think this is we were trying always to have the as it is possible to have more pragmatic and practical policy, towards the superpowers and big countries and big nations. We're trying always like this. There was a period when Georgian kings were going to Istanbul or they were going to Tehran and even, adopted for some time their religion to save their country. It was our history. But everything is changeable, everything is changing in the world. And there was a period that we were defending Russia's southern borders, and they were defending us from the invaders from the east. But then everything changed. They decided to make Georgia part of Russia. Mm-hmm. And we, the people and the country, was against this. Mm-hmm. We were living 200 years under, to say so, Russians, It's one of the reasons where we understand Russians much more better than in the United States. Or
but you never gave up. You never gave up the Georgian dream.
Yes, but we never gave up this. Because it's inside of us, and it's founded on our Christianity, on our traditions, on our language, our culture, which we are defending. First demonstration to defend Georgian language in Georgia was during the Soviet period. Mm-hmm. It was first demonstration of young people when the center decided to change the law that our state language is Georgian and to make it Russian. The students came out in the street, and it was very dangerous at that time because the military forces can shoot at that time to those people. But they came to the street, and Shevardnadze was at that time first secretary, and he called to Moscow to the Central Committee and said, look, the people are in the street. If you want to make, some revolutionary movement, and we will change. And they changed this in Moscow.
Very impressive.
It was very impressive at that time. We are trying to do this all our history. Mm-hmm. All our history, defend ourselves from right or defend ourselves from left, from east and west. Mm-hmm. And thanks God, we managed to do this. Mm-hmm. Now we have party in Georgia. It's a small party, but the name of this party is Neutral Georgia. And they are sure that Georgia must be neutral country, like Switzerland.
You think so too?
No, I don't think so, because it will be very difficult because of our situation of being in this place geographically, because of this only. Mm-hmm. And it's very important. And the fathers of geopolitics, beginning from Ratzel and Haushofer, they were saying that, and I believe in this, that geographical position is quite important for the country.
But it seems so similar to Switzerland's position. I mean, you are in a region with a lot of mountains.
But
you are at the crossroads.
But your neighbors are not so aggressive as our neighbor Russia.
But a neutral Georgia would be also from the Russian perspective a good thing, because then the Russians know Georgia will never be part of NATO, will never be part of a military alliance. So you don't give the Russians an excuse, a pretext to attack you.
The politics and diplomacy is the art of reachable, yeah? One very wise man say this. So we can do this without naming, what we are doing neutral, for example.
So you are neutral, but you will never confess you're neutral.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Mm-hmm. It's a politics. I think we can do this.
It means that the Russians, that the Georgians have to make believe the Russians that if the Russians attack Georgia, they probably will get a problem with the United States and NATO, but you should do this without bringing NATO into your country. So it's a very subtle balance act on the tightrope.
As usually, it depends which government will be in the United States, for example. Democrats or Republicans, previous leftists, more leftist or more right, more liberal or more conservative. By the way, you know, my age people here in Georgia, I think they are more conservatives than the liberals. We are much more founded on our traditions, our family values, and so on. What the Trump administration and his people are saying now, the most of the Georgians are thinking like this.
Yeah. Not only the Georgians.
Not only Georgians, but some others also. But you know, when you know Russians well, you know, I can tell you some time ago, in 2019, I can show you this book that was published in United States.
A closer look at Russia and its influence in the world.
Here is my article there, Vision from Georgia, the Russia in 21st century. Believe me, I wrote there, it was in 2019, what happened in Ukraine in 2021. Because we knew Russians from inside, much more closer than Americans or someone else. Really.
Let me just let me dig into this. I wanted to ask you this anyway. You said we understand the Russians very well from within, from the inside. So what is the most important thing to know about Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin? In the West, many people, or some of the crusaders, you could say, are saying, well, Putin, he's like a Stalin with a nice face. He seems to be a pragmatist, but he's a terrible imperialist, he's a dictator, he's a tyrant, he's deeply corrupt, and he wants to restore the Soviet Union to its former glory, called Greater Russia, and therefore he is about to attack the Baltics. If he is not stopped in Ukraine, he will proceed to Poland, etc., etc. Could you explain what is your advice to the Western leaders? How to understand with Putin, how to deal with Putin?
You know, it's impossible to have affairs with Russia and not be pragmatic and practical. It's impossible. But there is a big difference in attitudes with Russia of the big powers, I mean superpowers, I mean like United States and China is, and even such a regional powers like Turkey or Iran or, you know, some others, or even the countries of the BRICS. They have more possibilities to work with Russia from their point of view, from their interests, and so on, defending this. But you know, their interests have not only big and powerful countries, but also the small countries, like Georgia is. And especially if you are the neighbor of such a big country like Russia is, you know? And always, you are in fear that this big country wants, you know, to eat you, to say so. Yeah. I mean, sure, yeah. And this is our history. We were living like this. But we managed, you know, most of all, history, you know, to work with this, live like this.
But is Putin an enemy of the West at the end of the day?
I think that from the point of the West, he is the enemy. But from the point of Russia's interests, it's not.
Is he a pragmatist? Is he a pragmatist, Putin?
He is pragmatist, you know, covered with imperialism. I think so.
A pragmatic imperialist.
Pragmatic imperialist, like this, you know, really, because the leaders of Russia always were imperialists, you know, practically, all of them. You cannot imagine, this is one of the mistakes of the West, that they can build Western-style democracy in Russia. I'm sure that it's impossible. if someone thinks about this, like I read this famous book of the State Secretary of at Clinton's time, you know, you mean the Russia Hand, this very famous book, which was written by the...
James Baker?
No. During Clinton's period, the former journalist, I forget his name. I'm sorry. I will remember.
Yeah.
He wrote there about this Strobe Talbot.
Oh,
I'm sorry
Strobe
to
Talbot.
forget Strobe Talbot, because I met him
Talbot.
in Georgia when he was here during Gamsahurdia's period.
Yeah.
He was writing. At that time, he was the columnar of the Time magazine. And he was here and he was writing about the opposition, I mean, Gamsahurdia and his supporters as the very awful people. Who want to destroy Gorbachev's democratic Soviet Union. Yeah, really. It was like this. A first delegation that was in the United States during Gamsahurdia's period. I was the member of this delegation. It was an educational delegation. We visited several university centers in the United States. And practically all professors and scholars there were asking us, why you won't destroy this democrat Gorbachev's reformist Soviet Union?
So that's the great illusion, a democratic Russia, it's impossible.
I think it's impossible totally. And they were thinking that it's possible. During Clinton's period, they were thinking that's possible, that it's possible to build democratic Russia with Yeltsin, democratic international order, new international order. You know very well that after all geopolitical important events, I mean, so that means First World War, Second World War, then the Cold War, always someone was deciding to make new, fair, international order. But it's practically impossible, like nowadays, you know?
And what does
because it's against realpolitik, it's against reality.
What does it mean for the West and for the position also President Trump has to take now vis-à-vis Putin when Russia is not a democracy and will not be? What does it mean for the Western countries? How to deal with Putin, how to deal with Russia?
You know, when you are speaking about the Western countries, we must, distinguish, because the Trump will work with Putin and Russia not as the, democratic country or not democratic country. He will work like superpower with the superpower, maybe, or for sure, a little bit weaker or more weaker than the United States is now. But the main is that there will not be the world with one pole. It's for sure. And when
it's a bit like after the Second World War, when Roosevelt, Churchill and Stalin were sitting together, some kind of enemies.
Quite a lot of people are calling nowadays situation searching for new Yalta. Yeah, I understand them, of course. But maybe instead of Great Britain, I'm very certain there'll be China. United States, China and Russia sitting and deciding about the new world order. But I think the main will be that all of them will defend their interests. First of all, their interests. Chinese interests, Russian interests, Americans, of course, the American interests.
How strong is Russia at the moment? How strong is Vladimir Putin's Russia? It's a very confusing picture. On the one hand, you see this army which has total trouble to achieve its goals in Ukraine. The Russians are saying it's just because we're not really fighting. I mean, if we don't go as much as we could. But it's surprising that the Russian army doesn't seem to be so strong. Then we have the resilience of the Russian economy with all the sanctions. They did well, but they are somehow on the verge of a financial collapse. Putin, he seems to be strong, he seems to be confident, but one has the feeling there are a lot of troubles and problems in Russia. How strong or how weak is Russia at the moment?
I can tell you like this, founded in reality. Russia will not be so weak not to pay attention to its interests. I think like this.
So they're strong enough.
Strong enough, not so weak not to pay attention to his interests, to its interests.
And is Putin diminished after this war, or has he become stronger through this war?
Not stronger, but strong enough to keep his, order and what he's doing now in Russia. Because you can see, after every elections, so-named elections in Dasa, we understand what kind of elections are there. But really, I'm sure that most of the Russians are supporting Putin. Someone likes this or does not like this. Most of the Russians, they are supporting policy of Putin. Maybe it's awful, maybe it's very bad, maybe it's not so good to say diplomatically, but it's reality.
You have seen the old Soviet Union. You have had your education. You have studied history. You know, of course, the strength and the weakness of the Soviet Union. And now you see Vladimir Putin, a leader. How is Putin in the history of Russian and Soviet leaders? Is he old style kind of leader? Is Putin a leader from the past, or is he in the history of Russia a more pragmatic, even more democratic leader? I mean, he's not a Stalin, he's not a tyrant with a gulag and things like that. I mean, he's authoritarian, they crushed the opposition, of course, but is Putin progress in the Russian history, or is it just the same as always?
I don't think that he's the progress in Russian history, but his people which are around him and what they are writing and what they are saying, and practically all the world knows this. They are founded on the Russian ideas, to say so. Russian uniqueness as the world power, East and West, this Russian eagle looking to the both sides.
Grabbing land on both sides.
Yeah, Putin is trying to continue this, and he's saying this openly to his people. When he's saying this, you can feel this, that he's trying this. Maybe not to rebuild the Soviet Union, because he understands that it's different situation all over the world, but somehow to rebuild great Russia, for sure. This is his ideology from one side. From another side, he will take in account, for example, what really is going on. For example, there was Biden's United States, and now it's Trump's United States. And I think people around him understand quite well that they will have relations with the United States of Trump. It's quite different when have with the United States of Biden or Obama, who invented this reshuffling, this something like this F-America ideas to work with Russia. Russia is Russia, and always I think that some changes there will be, of course, mostly because of economics and the situation all over the world, because of these sanctions, because how they changed their economy. That Russians were not producing a lot of things in Russia, and after the sanctions, they begin to do this.
But Putin is a man from St. Petersburg. One could say he's a man from the West. His brother died during the occupation of the Germans in Leningrad, this terrible event in the Second World war. He speaks fluently German. He was very well on very good terms with the Germans. Chancellor Schröder was a close friend. He was in the German Bundestag. He was saying, we are going to the West. I know from inside the Kremlin that Putin said to 3 American presidents, let us join NATO, let us build NATO together. Has Putin changed, or has the West been too arrogant towards the Russians after they were defeated in the Cold War? Did they activate somehow a kind of inferiority complex within the Russian soul, which wants to be respected? What's the psychological situation here?
I think the second, what you mean. But the Germany is a little bit different case, I think so. When we are speaking about the Germany and Russia, I always remember what Bismarck said and wrote about Russia. He knew Russia very well. He was ambassador there and he speaks fluent Russian. And he was writing a lot of things about Russia.
Who is that?
Bismarck.
Ah, Bismarck. Okay.
Bismarck, yes. His attitude towards Russia was much more practical, you know. And everyone knows, I think, who is interested in history, that when emperor sent him out, Bismarck, to be a pensioner, to say so, he told him, I will give you only one advice, no more. With all means avoid war with Russia. And went out. And they did not follow this advice.
A few years later, he had an alliance of the Russians against him.
And it was the First World War, and the Second World War, and what happened, everyone knows. Mm-hmm. So the case of Germany is a little bit different. But, you know, generally West must work, you know, pragmatically with Russia. There is no way.
And not in the crusade mode that we want to turn the Russians into Americans.
I think they cannot reach anything with the crusade,
now,
you know.
It's totally interesting. It's so interesting what you're saying. Let's speak about the European Union. Let's speak about Germany. You mentioned it. Germany was blossoming with very good relations to Russia. The German success model was based on rather cheap energy from Russia, markets in China, and the Americans paid for the military with NATO, so they could prosper. Exactly. That was the model. Now Germany is on a war path with Russia almost. The European Union has cut all the ties with Russia. What does this mean for the future? I mean, you are a geopolitical historian. What would you say? Can Europe afford to be on these antagonistic terms with Russia?
I think that it depends which forces will come in Europe to the governments in such a countries like Germany is, like France is. And, you know, this will play, you know, very important role in the future of relations. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that no one will allow, to say so, I mean this rightist party, radical party in Germany, to form the government.
No. At the moment it's not possible.
It's impossible. The same is in France. Maybe Le Pen's party will have a lot of, you know, voices and a lot of persons, but no government for sure. But this struggle inside these European countries between liberals and conservatives will have reflects on Russian.
And the conservatives are more closer to Russia.
Not close, but they will have more pragmatic politics towards Russia.
But can Europe afford a continuation of this confrontation with Russia? I don't know. I have the impression that, for example, Germany and the German economy is doomed without Russia. But we have a world economy, we have a lot of flexibility, there can be other ways, probably Russia can be substituted by other powers, but can Europe proceed on this confrontation with Russia, or do they have to find back to pragmatic relations with the Kremlin?
I'm very sorry to Europe and Europeans, but I think the main is, can we speak about Europe as Europe, or the separate countries like Mr. Trump likes to have relations now with the several quite important but nation states and not European Union. And I always remember the words of the Henry Kissinger. If I want to know the Europe's idea, which phone number I will dial. I'm not sure that, dialing now the number of head of European Union will be, to say so, interesting for Trump.
Sure. The EU, we have to say the EU is not the same thing as Europe. I would say I'm for Europe, but I'm very skeptical about the EU. I want to have more Europe.
That's why I mentioned how it will go in the main European countries. First of all, in Germany and in France. Which forces will come, the government, in nearest future. How the elections will.
But what is your advice? What is your advice to Germany, for example, or even to Brussels? What would be your advice to Germany vis-à-vis Russia? What should they do?
I'm very sorry. They need not my advice. Nor Germans and nor Europeans.
Don't be too humble. Don't be too humble.
I am not such a person.
Probably they need your advice. They probably need your advice right now.
I'm not such a person to advise them. But, from my point of view, the main is to count Russia as Russia. And not like fairy tales that you can build bright democratic future with Russia. I think this is impossible, first of all. And if someone is thinking about this, it's not, it's not real, it's not true. So, pragmatic, realistic policy. Only like this.
Also for Europe and also Germany.
Some kind of pressure, maybe economic, some kind of. Now I'm sure.
But not full confrontation.
No. Because confrontation with Russia is not a perspective. It's not possible. Russia will have any time the enough force, economic and political and military, first of all, to defend its interests, like they understand this. And this is realpolitik. I want to say now that the Trump will sit with the European leaders, not the European Union, and European leaders, and will speak with him what they can exchange, what they can tell Russia to exchange in the situation of the war with Ukraine, and to finish this war, and to maybe to lift some sanctions, and to take European gas and energy resources back to Europe, and instead Russia will do something in Ukraine.
Do you think,
finish this war, something like this.
Do you think that President Putin is ready to go back to good relations or pragmatic relations with the European Union, with Germany, with all these countries? Or are the Russians so deeply offended? That was my impression when I was in Russia. They seem to be endlessly offended by Europe, disappointed by Germany, disappointed. One had almost the impression as if the Russians were turning their back on Europe and trying to demonstrate Europe. You thought you could push us away. Now we will show you what it means for you if we push you away. Or do you think when Trump somehow manages to get back to normal relations, will Putin go back to pragmatism with Europe again, or what will be happening?
I think that Russia always were trying to divide the West. I mean, to divide the United States
Europe,
from
Europe and States.
from Europe and European countries inside.
Yeah.
The more, not supporters of Russian policy, but more loyal to Russian policy, something like this.
Yes.
I mean, traditionally, and it's no secret, that France, Italy, some others were much more loyal to Russian politics than some others, which are more strict.
Yeah. Great Britain, for example.
For example, they will continue to do this. I think so. And they will try, to divide, the United States from European countries, to speak separately to the leaders of the important European countries and United States. And they can just, they look what Trump is doing, because Trump is not going to speak with Europe. He's really going, and he's saying this openly, to the European nation states.
Is the European Union, is Europe, after the Ukraine, the greatest loser of this war? Are you pessimistic about the future of Western Europe?
Yes, I am. Because, unfortunately, Europeans made quite a lot of mistakes in this war and before this war.
Yeah.
Before this war and with this war. Not paying attention what Putin said in Munich, for example.
2007.
Yes, this was the biggest mistake, I'm sure. Because they don't believe in this. That Putin is going really to do what he said there.
But Putin made many mistakes too.
Yes,
he thought the Ukraine war would be over within 5 days.
When we will wait these mistakes, which are more harmful and more, for Europe and for the situation, in this article, which I, show, it was in 2019. Nobody was thinking that about the war in Ukraine. Nobody. But I was writing there, if it will be possible, and if Russia will feel that they can defend their interest using the force. I'm not writing openly about the war, but using the force. So they will do this. And they did this.
Yeah. And Putin can afford to make bigger mistakes because he has a bigger country than others, so he can make bigger mistakes, but not too many big mistakes. Are you happy that Donald Trump is elected in the United States?
I'm not happy, but I'm satisfied.
It's good news.
It's good news, really. But to be happy, it's something different. But, nobody feel happy when, in such a big country, happens.
You seem happy.
But I'm satisfied because all the main principles which, Trump is saying about, for the men of my age, I'm 72, of the family values, importance of religion, to defend the traditions of the country, to defend, way of life. I will be very open, not to give a lot of, flags to the LGBT, society. Yeah. A lot of people understand quite not fairly, what happened in Georgia with this law against LGBT propaganda. I want to tell this openly, All the time in our history, these kind of people, they had no any problems in Georgia. Never, even during Soviet period, believe me. But they were in their circle, Not to say sitting quiet and so on, but they were living normally. But they were not coming with the flags in the streets and going to the schools and kindergartens, for the lozenges. And, this is not acceptable for us. That is propaganda. Not that they are living normally without any problem.
It's extremely interesting that we're seeing now this conservative wave. If you look at the United States, you could even speak of a conservative revolution, or with the Javier Milei in Argentina, is like a chainsaw conservatism that we see now happening. Is like downsizing the government. But it's interesting. I mean, is it fair to say that the world is now ruled by conservatives? Xi Jinping is a conservative. Probably he's overdoing his authoritarianism in China. There's a lot of resistance. Putin considers himself to be a conservative politician. When you read his papers about woke ideology, about the way of the West, you think Donald Trump is speaking. You have Donald Trump. He's a kind of anarcho-conservative businessman. You have a lot of conservative parties now in Europe gaining strength. Are the similarities between these worldwide conservative movements, is this something which is good, it's bad, is it similar, or are the difference larger than the things they have in common?
You know, if you want my point of view about these global processes, all my life, from the period when I began to study international relations, I was against revolutions. And I am still against any kind of revolution. More, I am very sorry to French people in France, but I think that the worst thing what happened in the history, really, that's my personal, this was French Revolution. I think so.
It was, you could say it was the role model for the Bolshevist revolution.
I'm a supporter of evolution, not the revolution. And I think that they are not ruling now on conservative forces, but the conservative wave is coming back.
But is it a conservative revolution, or is it a conservative evolution that we are seeing right now?
I think now on this stage is conservative, more the feeling of revolution, but it will not be revolution, I'm sure. Of course, like Argentinian president, some others will follow Trump, I'm sure. Even, in the backyard of United States, maybe mostly, because what the reactions will be from Panama, from Venezuela, from Costa Rica, from when Trump is saying that he needs a kind of order in his backyard, he will follow this for sure and strictly. I think so, and this is the main his goal. What he was. I'm sorry, not Georgia, several thousand kilometers away, but his backyard. And it's true that someone is speaking about the re-establishing of the Monroe Doctrine and something like this. This is more real and inside country. Because what he was saying before elections and what he promised and what he began to do, entering the White House, it's what he was saying about the American order, and the backyard of America, and so on. This is his first, to make America great again.
But the good thing and the interesting thing is that if we compare it to the Cold War, we had a real ideological confrontation between Ronald Reagan, you could say, and still the Soviet Union. And today, this is interesting. It seems to me that the big powers are mentally, ideologically, despite all the difference, they are closer. They're somehow in the same universe, you could say, of more or less conservative values, despite all the differences. I would never say that Russians and Americans and Chinese are the same, but I think that the language of these three civilizations has become more similar than in any time in the history of the last 100 years.
Because they are most economic and business powers than political. I think so. This is the difference. At that time, the main was politics. This time, the main is economics and business. I think the globalization, if it's going on, and it's going on, first of all, it's from the economic point of view and business point of view. And you can't do anything against this. This is for sure. Look what's going in China. If someone will tell 20 years ago that China will be economically like this, someone will say you are stupid. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
So this is the main reason. That first of all, they will speak with each other from economic and business point of view, and not political ideology or something.
That means that we are entering after some years of confrontation, we are entering now a world of more cooperation?
Multipolar cooperation, I think so. This is the only way. No way. You know, very interesting. You know, I'm repeating several times, but in his Diplomacy, which was written at the end of at the beginning of 90s, Kissinger was writing that. At that time, he was writing that not the unipolar world, but the multipolar world, and he was saying that there will be 4 poles, not openly, but inside. It was, you know, to read really, you know, it was United States, China, Russia, and Europe, if Europe can be united. But unfortunately, we see that Europe is not united, beginning from the problems of energy, for example, or something else, and ending with the political. And that's why Europe could not, you know, be the 4th pole. I think the 3 poles still are, and they will be.
We have started our conversation with Georgia. We are ending our, thank you very much, our conversation. It's so interesting. I could continue for hours, but we have to find a suitable ending. We have started with Georgia, and you have witnessed and also shaped Georgian history of the last 33 years, to be exact. What is the achievement of Georgia you are most proud of?
Because we managed to become a state, more or less stable, to compare with the situation which was at the end of 80s. I mean, you know, dismantling of Soviet Union and beginning of our independence, regaining our independence. The difference of what we were at that time and who are we now and what are we now. First of all, as a state, founded on the rule of law, it's very important. Georgians, believe me, I know this very well, they are not the people who like, you know, to follow laws. They never will be. They always be a little bit, you know, different, to act like they want to act. So now, at last, we are still going, but, you know, successfully to the direction to be the state founded on the rule of law. And this is main, I think. And with the government, with the police, with the army, which more or less can defend itself, you know. And, you know, we are very proud that we took part in these operations, NATO operations, abroad, in Afghanistan or in Africa or something like this, together with the European Union in Africa, by the way. And our soldiers had quite a good experience, and a lot of young people, you know. So this is the difference. You know, we are becoming state, not failed state.
State building.
You know, state building.
Successful state building.
Successful state building. This is the main achievement, I think so.
We have talked a lot about huge powers, about great powers. You have a huge power in your backyard. In the backyard of Georgia, there is Russia. One can say like this. We have China, we have the United States, the European Union.
I'm sorry, it was a joke during Soviet period. This is the Caucasus, yes?
Yes.
Over the Caucasus in Russia is Zakavkazia.
Yes.
And they were calling us Zakavkazia.
Yes.
Not only us, but Azerbaijan. So the countries over Caucasus. But there was a joke that the Russia for us is over Caucasus also, Zakaukazi.
Okay.
If we are looking
as I said, it's the backyard of Caucasus.
If we are looking from the south,
Yeah.
the Russia is Zakaukazi.
It's the barbarians in the north. The question is, we talked a lot about great powers and huge powers and superpowers. Georgia is a small state. Switzerland is a small state. There are many small states around. Some of them are highly successful, like Singapore and others. What's the message of the small state to the great states? What is the contribution of the small state in a world always dominated by huge powers?
To defend its own interests, founded only on the realism and real politics. I think so. This is only the recipe for the small countries. Of course, the small countries has their interests, but you can defend them only founded on the realism and reality and real politics.
Never wishful thinking.
Never wishful thinking. I think this is the main.
Well, Mr. Sghenti, thank you very much for this
You're
conversation. It was
Thank
great.
you.
All the best, and let's see what the future brings.
Let us see. Let's hope that everything will finish.
Meine Damen und Herren, das war das Gespräch, sehr lehrreich. Wir könnten noch weitergehen, aber wir müssen hier einen Endpunkt finden. Ich danke Ihnen für die Aufmerksamkeit und wünsche Ihnen einen schönen Tag. Wir melden uns selbstverständlich zurück hier noch einmal aus Georgien mit weiteren Beiträgen. Ihnen alles Gute und ich freue mich auf das nächste Wiedersehen.